considered that we are living in a unique time, that something world-changing is about to happen, and that it might concern you? If so, you're in the right place. Keep listening, and you'll hear thought-provoking views behind the news that point to a new and better future for all. Many people now sense that humanity is not alone. So consider this. If the Christ or the Buddha walked among us today as modern men, would we recognize them? What would they be saying? And most importantly, would we listen? Every Sunday on this program, Share International Radio, we'll examine extraordinary events that are unfolding behind the headline news. This may be the message of hope you've been waiting for. And now, welcome to this week's show.
Welcome to the 61st episode of Share on the Air Radio. And on this show, we are on part 2 of our series on unity. This time we're discussing the difference between spiritual unity and ordinary unity. My name is Cielito Pascual. I am podcasting from Seattle, Washington. I alternate co-hosting duties with Diana Gold Holland, who is based in Vancouver, Canada. And we don't often mention this, but we are both volunteers in this work. We're part of a global network of several thousands of volunteers around the world who are sharing with the public an extraordinary story of the immediate future of humanity. We are indeed living in a very unique time. And the event that is unfolding today is the emergence of Maitreya, the world teacher, and the Masters of Wisdom into full public life to work directly with humanity. And every Sunday on this show, we present an aspect of this story. It's a story that's been unfolding for several decades. We have covering this story also is Share International Magazine. That's a source of our information. The chief editor, Benjamin Creme, is the author of a number of books covering this story. So everything you hear is sourced from Share International Magazine and the works of Benjamin Creme. The magazine continues to be published, even though Benjamin Creme has passed on. His work does not stop. He's continuing his work, I am presuming. On the other side, probably working more directly with the Masters of Wisdom, more directly than ever. So on this show, we are educating the public, letting them know this information, and it's for your consideration only. We do not present this as truth or dogma. I certainly believe, based on my experience with this information for nearly 30 years, I've had my own experiences to tell me that this story is true. But it is up to you to consider it for yourself, to explore further. As I said, we have so far 6 shows exploring this story. And with every show, we have a special guest to talk about an aspect, again, as I said, of the emergence of Maitreya, the world teacher, and the Masters of Wisdom. This is a non-denominational story. It is for people of all religions, all spiritual traditions, and for those who do not ascribe to any particular religious tradition. So, on this show today, I'm very pleased to welcome Jonathan Knudsen. He's a longtime student of what's known as the Ageless Wisdom teachings. That's another name for the body of work of esoteric study that comes from Benjamin Creme, from the author Alice A. Bailey. Jonathan Knudsen is based in the Bay Area. He has spoken publicly for years on this story throughout Northern California. And very pleased to have him on our show to continue to explore this story. And I just also want to welcome to this show our new listeners. And with every show, we try to focus on those of you who are new to this show to make sure that you're up to speed, that you can find more information online. So continue to listen on this show. We'll give you more ways to learn more about this story. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us today. You have considerable experience in study, 20 years of study of the Ageless Wisdom teachings, and your own personal experiences of this story. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
I want to remind our listeners who didn't catch our show last week that we had part 1 of unity, and we were exploring unity in the time of division. It's February 12th, 2017. So many things happening all over the world that would appear to be rather troublesome. And hopefully on this show today, we'll provide some insights. Jonathan will help us see things in a new way that can give us a sense of hope for the future. So today we're talking about the difference between spiritual unity and ordinary unity. Start us off on that. Help us understand the difference. And I will acknowledge, thank you so much for being on. You're under the weather today, and you are willing to join us. So really appreciate your dedication, Jonathan.
Well, certainly. To answer your question, to understand spiritual unity in contrast with the ordinary idea of unity, first, I would say we have to recognize that we're souls in incarnation. So we're, in the esoteric understanding, we're immortal beings that incarnate again and again in a process of spiritual evolution. And our souls, which are totally unique and individuated, all come from the same source, which we call God, who to us is the great being that ensouls our planet. And our souls at the same time are not independent of one another. They're commonly rooted in this great oversoul. And we're children of that God, literally, that oversoul, all brothers and sisters, quite literally, and are in fact gods ourselves, just in what I guess you might call embryonic form. And on a soul level, we are in perfect unity. And what spiritual unity is really the reflection of that soul unity here in relationship with others in incarnation on the plane of Earth. And so to reflect that unity, we have to have a connection in some way with our soul. And one of the key ways that is through what's called the intuition. And when I use that word, I don't mean like the kind of intuition that usually people might associate with kind of psychic telepathy, like knowing who's calling on the phone before you pick up the phone or something. In this sense, intuition is the reflection of your soul, you might say, in the mirror of your mind. So it's your connection with your soul, with your mind. And there is a technical definition of intuition that refers to being in contact with very high spiritual planes. But there's a more general definition of intuition, which I'm using right now, that refers to a capacity within reach of many. And the master, who was Benjamin Crimm's master, who wrote an article every month in Share International, and whose articles were collected in a book called A Master Speaks, a wonderful book. He describes the intuition as, he says, quote, it is essentially loving understanding or true wisdom. He says, our task when living and working among you will be to stimulate wherever possible this higher faculty of mind and lead you forward excuse me, lead you forward on the way.
I want to pause here to illustrate, really to anchor for our listeners. You said, our in that quote, our work among you. I just want to underscore that the masters of wisdom, led by Maitreya, the world teacher, are emerging into the world to work directly with humanity. Historically, the masters of wisdom have worked behind the scenes. They have influenced and guided humanity's evolution from the remote sections of the world, but they are stepping forward now. They are already working directly with some of the most advanced thinkers in many different areas of life, not just religious or spiritual. The masters are working directly with the leading thinkers in economics, in politics, in the arts, in religion, in science. So this is covering every aspect of human expression, and the master that you're referring to worked directly with Benjamin Creme. His words can be found in every issue of Share International magazine, which can be found online at share-international.org. Sorry for the interruption, but just wanted to bring our listeners up to speed.
Yeah. So basically, to develop, the intuition, you really have to use it. And it's facilitated greatly, your connection with your intuition, when you meditate. But you also really need to apply your intuition through creative action, I would say, in service to others. The intuition is something that actually only arises in relation to how we can serve others. And so as we do serve and meditate, our soul gets more and more in contact, or more and more of a grip. It gets more and more of a grip on our personalities, as increasingly able to direct the personality, and eventually it guides us into some kind of group service work.
And there is a distinction between the soul and personality that you're illustrating here. And we're hearing the music. We're going to go to break, and we're going to continue with this fascinating conversation on unity, the distinction between spiritual unity and ordinary unity, with Jonathan Knudsen. We'll be back after the break. Share on the Air Radio.
Your conscious connection to a more mindful world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Spiritual, metaphysical, green living, psychic, alternative healing, life coaching. Do any of these or similar terms apply to your business or cause? If so, you are in a niche market with a very specific audience. Conscious Gate PR is the world's leading conscious public relations agency. With a global reach of over 4 million and growing, we offer comprehensive media campaigns to our targeted market. Learn more at ConsciousGatePR.com. Conscious marketing for conscious minds.
Join Vibe Nation radio host, international psychic medium Carrie Turcotte, as she guides her listeners to rediscover themselves by accessing the keys of knowledge that already exist within. Each week's show is divinely orchestrated to intertwine with the universal energies, allowing the listeners to go deeper within. At the end of each show, Carrie will tap into the energies of the listeners and give a message from Spirit about the upcoming week. If you really want to get to know who you truly are, join Carrie each Monday at 3 p.m. on Vibe Nation Radio.
Maitreya's Mission, the book by Benjamin Creme, is a riveting exploration of life ahead. It reveals how the world teacher, Maitreya, and other ancient guardians of the human race are emerging now and are showing us how to release our divine potential. Investigate for yourself at shareontheairradio.org. That's shareontheairradio.org. shareontheairradio.org.
Hey everybody, Rachel Ray here. Nothing brings a bigger smile to my face than cooking up a big meal for the whole family and lots of friends. But there's not enough room at my table for the 17 million kids in our country who struggle with hunger. That's why the Feeding America nationwide network of food banks collects surplus food to give hope to hungry kids. But they can't do it without your help. Support Feeding America and your local food bank at feedingamerica.org.
A message from Feeding America and the Ad Council.
And we're back on Share on the Air Radio. I am Cielito Pascual, and my guest is Jonathan Knudsen. We're talking about the distinction between spiritual unity and ordinary unity. And Jonathan, in the last segment, you were talking about developing spiritual intuition towards unity. You talked about how developing spiritual intuition comes out of meditation as well as being in service to others. And in demonstrating the qualities of the soul that happens because of meditation, we feel drawn to doing service. And oftentimes when we feel drawn to doing service, we are looking around to joining a group. And many people I know are feeling the call to do work that makes a difference in the world. They're looking to volunteer their time. They're looking to be a part of a group. So how do people, once together in a group, how does that work to bring about spiritual unity? What takes place?
Well, there's the series of books called the Agni Yoga books, which are a major series of revelations from the masters of the Ageless Wisdom teachings. And in the Agni Yoga books, there's a book about spiritual communities called New Era Community. And it talks about the basis of the community, the basis of a spiritual community. And this is coming from a master of wisdom named Master Moria. So the Master Moria, talking about this, he says that the basis of the community lies in freedom of thinking and in reverence for the teacher, the capital T. To accept the teacher means to fall in line with the workers fighting the fire. So, metaphorical statement, but he cites two different things that are the fundamental basis of spiritual communities. One is freedom of thinking, and the other is what he calls reverence for the teacher, the capital T. And with the capital T, he's really referring to, I think he's referring to Maitreya, actually, but you could substitute any of the masters of wisdom for that. So, let's, if we could, but maybe we could take a look at that second part first, this idea of reverence for the teacher as being a pillar of spiritual unity. He's not talking in reverence, he's not talking about a devotional attitude, which is one of worship. The masters, the last thing they want is to be worshipped. They want to be understood as our friends, as Maitreya asks us to see him, as our elder brothers who come from the same source that we do, God, and who have walked the same path as we do now as human beings here on earth. Reverence really refers to deep respect. So if you deeply respect someone, do you ignore what they say or not take it seriously? No. So to revere the teachers, that is to say Maitreya and the masters of wisdom, we listen to them. And that means we study their teachings, which are their communications to us. And you cannot separate the teaching from the teacher. A tree is known by its fruit. So when you use your intuition in the study of the teaching, that's really the proper way to study that the masters would advise. And when you intuitively contact the meaning of a teaching from your perspective, you actually contact, believe it or not, the energies that are behind that teaching. So there are these great spiritual energies that are entering our planet all the time that, that the masters of wisdom are the custodians of. And they send into the world, to humanity. And we experience them, Benjamin Creme has said, first simply as ideas. Ideas like for sharing, equality, justice, liberty, and so forth. These are actually energies that we experience as ideas at first. But because we've only experienced them as ideas, we have not actually grasped their meaning. So as a result, the actual reality of sharing and justice and liberty and brotherhood and so forth is basically, as Benjamin Creme said, not really to be found anywhere in the world. So meaning...
can I just pause?
Yes.
You're offering such rich ideas, so I just want to highlight that. The ideas of sharing, justice, liberty, one could also add in there democracy. That's an expression of liberty and justice. They're only experienced as ideas, not grasped as realities.
So far,
there's something you can... So can you just address that to the current condition of the world to help our listeners make some distinctions about what they're seeing in the news?
Well, in the world we have a situation where 21,000 people starve to death every single day, or die of hunger-related causes. Millions of people starve to death every year. Half the world lives in very, very serious deprivation. And so, we're taught these ideas like about sharing but we don't actually implement those ideas at all. We actually have a surplus of food in the world, and yet that food does not make it to the people. So we don't, we may think in terms of that we're Christians or something, and we believe in the idea of sharing, but the reality is that we're not actually doing that. We're not actually understanding and intuiting that the reality that we are brothers and sisters, that we're all one family, that we're not divided, and that we have to act, reflect that true spiritual unity that we have in the world. So that's we haven't really grasped the meaning. We attach ourselves to certain ideas, and we put ourselves into categories like being part of this religion or that ideology or that ism, but they're not something that we're actually perceiving the meaning of and being therefore animated, because when you grasp intuitively the meaning of any of these ideas or related ones, you actually become in direct contact with those energies, and they actually enter you and they animate you, and you actually are able to be a living expression of those energies, and that is really what we want.
That is really interesting. That's a very even myself being as involved as I've been. I don't think I've heard that idea articulated, that we have to... I've heard it intellectually, but I think it's finally through you sinking in, grasping something intuitively, grasping the meaning of something at the intuitive level, as opposed to, I assume you mean the mental level.
Yes.
You're saying that allows one to come into contact with the energies behind the principles, and then
that's right. Yeah.
Respond to those energies and then demonstrate those energies. It sounds like it's more than just this mental activity of I'm going to make a sign and I'm going to a rally and I'm going to march. That's a good thing to do, yet there's a deeper experience that's available to someone who wants to make a difference in the world. I think that's what you're telling us. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, you can understand something on a thought level, but the intuition is when the soul is actually being reflected in your mind. So your mind is reflecting the soul, and that's when you have intuitive contact. And it's when you actually have real contact with the meaning of an idea, the energies behind it. But if it's just a thought and the intuition is not operating and you're just reflecting not your soul, but your conditioning, then you're not in direct contact with the ideas. Maitreya says in his book, The Laws of Life, which are a collection of teachings that he gave to a certain man in London who gave them to two reporters and were eventually published in a book by Share International called The Laws of Life. And he says that, Maitreya says that when you study his teachings, that you will put them into practice and you will be transformed by them. And he's really saying the same thing. And so in this way, by doing that, by having, by studying the teachings in this way, using your intuition, that's the way that we have reverence for the masters. And that's the way that those teachings actually are put into practice. So that's why that's one of the key principles. Mm-hmm.
And I think I get we're about to go to a break, but I just wanted to mention I think that's why in the boots on the ground world that I also operate in, in activism, people burn out sometimes because they're coming from the thought level rather than the soul level. With all good intentions, it becomes an activity of exertion rather than an activity of compassion and standing up for human dignity. I think this is all just coming to me. But we are entering into another break, and we'll continue. You were talking about the thought, freedom of thought. So let's talk about freedom of thought after the break. Thank you, Jonathan. We'll be right back.
Free your mind. Expand your soul. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Have you bought into the idea that you have to work hard for your money, that business is hard? I will share some dynamic access consciousness tools to get you out of your own way so you can create a business that actually succeeds. Join me, Simone Millicers, on The Joy of Business at 4 p.m. Mondays Eastern.
Did you know that Share International Radio is more than just a podcast? If you're hungry for thought-provoking views behind the news, there may be a Share International event happening soon near you, providing a spiritual perspective you'll find nowhere else. To locate an event in your area, visit shareontheairradio.org. That's shareontheairradio.org. shareontheairradio.org.
My name is Dale Pazinski, and this is how I live united. I volunteer with United Way, helping the homeless in my community by teaching computer skills and helping them build a basic resume to save on their very own USB drive. It's huge when somebody says, "Hey man, that job that you helped me apply for, I got it." My name is Dale Pazinski. I help people achieve financial independence. So I don't just wear the shirt, I live it.
Give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Go to liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
And this is Share on the Air Radio. Thank you for being with us. So we're having a wonderful conversation with Jonathan Knudsen on the difference between spiritual unity and ordinary unity. And just a reminder again, we have recorded 60 episodes, over 60 episodes, including this one. And there's so many topics. I'm actually looking at the titles of the show. But if you're listening for the first time, go to our October 11th, 2015 show. That was our debut show, and our October 17th, 2015 show. Those two shows are great introductions to the story of the emergence of Maitreya, the world teacher, and the masters of wisdom. It's a great place to start if you're hearing this for the first time. And again, follow us on Facebook for updates and links to more information. Share on the Air Radio North America. So, Jonathan, let's talk about freedom of thought. You brought that up in the third segment. What's important about understanding that principle in relation to spiritual unity?
Well, it is a big subject. Unfortunately, free will or freedom of thought is seen sometimes within spiritual groups as an enemy of unity. And those people are right, but the unity that they seek is really unknowingly is not spiritual unity, but sentimental unity. And sentimental unity is what some might call emotional unity, although this is not exactly correct, because anyone can have emotions, but emotions may or may not be sentimental in the sense that I mean. Maitreya, in the Laws of Life, he talks about what he calls sincerity of spirit as being one of the keys to what he calls the art of self-realization. And he says that sincerity of spirit is expressed when you're having a heart-to-heart talk with someone. And in that situation, your emotions are reflecting your soul through your heart rather than talking about your mind. And so you're identifying then with your real self. When you instead identify with the emotion rather than identifying the self through the feelings of the heart, that's when an emotion becomes sentimental. And so on one level, sentimental unity basically involves emotional partiality to a common association of some kind you have with others. Like you personally identify your image of yourself, your ego image, with being a part of a group, like a religion, part of a religion, your family, ethnic group, a political movement, a clique or an in-group, your alma mater, your economic class or something. It could be all kinds of things. The point is you're on the inside of this association, and others not a part of it are seen as being on the outside. And it's based on an agreement about a belief about your group in comparison with others. So these agreements, these commonly shared, commonly held beliefs, are alignments of thought. And
beliefs which may or may not be real, beliefs which may or may not exist in reality. They're just made up, right?
Right. They're exactly. Beliefs are ideas about reality, but it's not. They're not reality themselves inherently. And so the spiritual teacher Krishnamurti, who this is not known generally to the public, not to too many people, but he was in daily contact with Maitreya by this very high spiritual contact, very high spiritual telepathy. And Benjamin Krim said, that, by the way, that Krishnamurti's teachings really are the teachings of Maitreya. And so Krishnamurti, he said, quote, thought is a material process. There's nothing sublime about thought. It's the response of memory, knowledge, and experience. So we have experience, unquote. So we have experience, it's painful or pleasurable, and that conditions our thought along certain lines. And when that conditioned thought is similar to others' thought in a given situation or instance, there may be an agreement, so to speak, of some kind of alliance, an alignment, a sentimental unity. So these agreements reflect our conditioning and not our souls. They don't reflect the feelings of the heart or the intuition. And because they reflect our conditioned minds, they involve comparison, which is fundamental to how the mind works when it's not being guided by the intuition. that is to say, by the soul. And Krishnamurti actually called comparison the root of all evil. So it's really the root of all evil because it is the basis of separation, which Maitreya in the Laws of Life, I believe, calls the only sin, if I'm not mistaken. So if you have this partiality to this religion, this ideology, this ism, this group, these people, you're basically implicitly or explicitly saying that you're right and others are wrong, or your group is good, others are bad, and so forth. And Maitreya talks about this. He talks about the high and the low and the good and the bad. You can't be good, I would point out, except by comparison with others who you see as bad. Or perhaps you see yourself as bad and others as good. Or within a materialistic lens, we see some people as high and others as low. If they have a lot of money, then they're high. Tomorrow they don't have any money, then they're low. And will be treated accordingly, and so forth. So sentimental unity in this way automatically creates sentimental disunity. There are these people you're unified with, but you can't be unified with them unless you're kind of counter-identified with these other people who you're disunified with, who you're comparing yourself with. So it creates these lines of separation between people. And despite the good feelings associated with being in sentimental unity with others, Benjamin Creme made it clear in Maitreya's Mission, Volume 2, that both sentimental unity and sentimental disunity are equally destructive. And clearly they really are the same thing. It's just two sides of the same coin. So these are really the divisions of right and wrong, good and bad, high and low, strong and weak, that are destroying the world, that are creating the chaos and the division that we see in it. And fundamentally, what we have to do is to reflect the spiritual reality of our oneness and not this material illusion of our separation, which are based on these beliefs. And so the Buddha, he said that in the sky, there's no distinction of east and west. People create distinctions out of their own minds and then believe them to be true. And the poet Rumi put it this way. He said, "Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about." So basically, how does sentimental unity demonstrate itself within a spiritual group? This is important to be able to answer your question. And Benjamin Creme's master in his book, The Master Speak, said each in his own way knows the power of unity. Each seeks from his neighbor approval and consent, but mechanical conformity of thought here has no place. That is to say, in a spiritual group. So speaking broadly, within a spiritual group, if you pursue sentimental unity, you create agreements, perhaps determined by voting or a related negotiation, the sanctioning of authority, whatever shape that authority may take, the authority of a group meeting perhaps, the authority of a leader, some combination. And this agreement, this decision, sets down a belief about what the right thing to do is for everybody, the plan of action or what have you. And at the same time conditions what is considered to be wrong. So in this kind of process, differences of view are weeded out, and basically one way is chosen as the course. You have a pattern for action that's laid down, and people are basically expected to, within the sentimental unity approach, to line up behind that. Whatever they really think privately, whatever they're really called from within to do differently, whether they're in conscious contact with that or not. And so it sets up an illusion that this vote or this agreement is really constituting the group wish. But at what level? Is it the level of the sentimental, the conditioned personality, where people come to this agreement, or is it the group wish on a soul level, and I would suggest it's not. So if you don't agree, getting to freedom of thought, if you don't agree with the group decision, you're taught to think, well, maybe something like you win some, you lose some, and that what is important is subordinating your individuality and following the authority of the group decision. And that seemed to be often a spiritual action. But I would suggest that it's really the opposite of that. Because I say in a spiritual group, you really have to renounce your desire to exert control over others by imposing this conditioned notion of what's right and what's wrong to shape them in their activities. And it's a difficult thing to do. If you see yourself, for example, as a leader within a group, and you believe you're a leader because your ego image says that you're higher than others, let's say, and it's your job to lead the group, that ego image only holds up if other members of the group reflect it back to you and are willing to be led. And if they're willing, then that is them being conditioned, basically. And this leader at the same time is being conditioned by their affirmation of the leader as a leader. So they're, in a sense, conditioning each other. Now, if they're not willing to be led, in this hypothetical example, then the leader won't see the reflection in others that confirms him or her as the leader. And when our ego image, through the seminal process is not affirmed, then that's disturbing, naturally. But on the other hand, if others do have that willingness to be led, it corrupts them, really, and corrupts the leader at the same time. And that's something that Krishnamurti said, virtually quote, about this very subject. Basically that's because the imposition of conditioning blocks the expression of people's true selves. And that's really what being in a spiritual group is about. So it's really
allowing
corruption
ourselves to be our true selves in the group rather than blocking our true selves.
Exactly. Putting up conditions that allow that to happen. And so anything that breaks the connection with the self is what creates corruption. It creates the idea that any identification with anything that is not the self, like the notion that I am higher, or it's my job to lead, or I am lower than leaders, so it behooves me to follow their guidance, be a follower, and so forth and so on.
Very interesting. We're going to continue our conversation after the break with Jonathan Knudsen. Stay with us.
Free your mind. Expand your soul. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. The number one reason girls drop out of school in sub-Saharan Africa is lack of access to feminine hygiene products. The Pads for Schoolgirls Project, an outreach of Humanity Healing International, is changing this paradigm by setting up sewing programs at schools, teaching girls a vocational skill, while producing the reusable pads that help keep them attending classes. The girls pay it forward by making and giving pad kits to other girls in need. To learn more, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Hi, I'm Kelly Fox, host and astrologer of The Astrology Show. Each week, I'll give you access to the current transits, which are a valuable tool that provide astrological information to help unlock the potential each of us has. Understanding the stars can help steer us in the right direction to make better informed choices. So if you're wondering what's going to happen in your week ahead, be sure to tune in to The Astrology Show for guidance. Mondays at 9 p.m. Eastern Time.
Every night, when the skies are clear, a remarkable event can be witnessed. A UFO the size of 5 football fields is moving through the skies just like a star. It pulses, it blinks, it changes color. This spacecraft appeared before as the Star of Bethlehem. Find out what it all means. Visit shareontheairradio.org. That's shareontheairradio.org.
It only takes a minute to find out if you may have prediabetes, and you can do it at doihaveprediabetes.org. But you're probably not going to, are you? Kids, work, listening to the radio. You're busy, which is great because busy people can't get prediabetes. Oh my, I read that wrong. They can. Should have worn my glasses. So visit doihaveprediabetes.org and take a short test, because prediabetes can be reversed.
Brought to you by the Ad Council and its pre-diabetes awareness partners.
And we are in our final segment of our show, Unity Part 2, understanding the difference between spiritual unity and ordinary unity. And I just want to take a moment to promote a show from October 30th, 2016. Part of this body of information is an absolutely compelling story connected to all of this, is a story of the work of our space brothers, primarily from the planet Venus and also Mars. And they are aware of the extraordinary transition taking place on planet Earth. They are in support of a very positive, very purposeful transition, and they are making their presence known in the world. Our show on October 30th, 2016 is entitled The Space Brothers and Their Mission, Dispelling the Fog, hosted by Diana Gold-Holland with our guest Gerard Artson in Holland. That's a fascinating show. If you're interested in that kind of topic and you want to know how it connects to what we're talking about today, you'll want to listen to that show. But back to our guest today, Jonathan Knudsen, and you were just talking about freedom of thought, and we could go on for hours, and we've got to have a part 2 to this show, because what you're presenting is so pertinent and relevant in my mind to what I'm observing, what I'm thinking about here in Seattle. I'm involved in the activist world here. We're doing a lot of groundbreaking things, and just what you've shared is helping me to understand the kind of contribution that I can make to the group that I'm a part of, and also to the work of what you and I are doing and the group of Share International. It's so helpful to have the insights that you're sharing today. So, at the topic of at one-ment, I think our listeners are familiar with that term. We've heard of being at one with the self, at one with God. Talk to us about that in the terms of spiritual unity.
Well, a master of wisdom in a book called Towards the Mysteries, which Benjamin Krim confirmed is totally authentic as the teachings of various masters. The master said, you can't become at one with yourself by becoming at one with others first. You must first become at one with yourself, all capitals, then only can you become at one with others, and so with God. So, it's a difficult process. People instinctively know that by acting from their intuition, acting from their center, their self, in a sense, will make them alone. It means giving up the comfort and security of sentimental unity with others and the protection of authority. And the devil's bargain, really, of sentimental relations is that you give up, in a sense, the expressing your soul in exchange for personality recognition. So spiritual unity really requires the killing out of the desire for personality recognition, and that's certainly a difficult thing. Krishnamurti said, and I quote, talking about the giving up of attachment to authority, he says, "This is very difficult for most of us because it means being insecure, standing completely alone, searching, groping, never being satisfied, never seeking success. But if we seriously experiment with it, then I think we shall find that there is no longer any question of creating or following authority, because something else begins to operate, which is not a mere verbal statement, but an actual fact. And there he's referring to the intuition. He goes on, he says, the man who is ceaselessly questioning, who has no authority, who does not follow any tradition, any book or teacher, becomes a light unto himself. And that's really the point in the spiritual group, is you have to first become a light unto yourself. And really what will save the planet and ultimately transform the planet are the energies and light of hierarchy that are sent through humanity. Maitreya said that humanity has to build every brick of a new world, but we're never going to do so because we're inspired by any new or old authority, any dogma, any belief, which only divide us, as we were discussing, and at this point would really doom us to the abyss, given the situation that we're in the world, the time we have left to solve our problems, which is so limited. So the only way forward is really for each person to basically take the responsibility to open the window, so to speak, within themselves, between the hierarchy and humanity. And that window is the intuition, and it's the hearts of humanity. So the presence of the masters and Maitreya it would be meaningless if humanity in sufficient numbers cannot turn the mirror of its heart, and for those who can, the mirror of their mind, so to speak, inward, to reflect the light and the love of their souls, which in turn reflects the light of hierarchy and the living plan of God. And so, because the great being that souls our earth has a plan for the unfoldment of life here on earth. And so that's really the only way we can save our world, because it's really the energy from hierarchy. It cannot adequately reach humanity except through the soul, passing over that bridge within each person that we call the intuition and the heart. And so the opening of that window, yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So we are you're saying that even if Maitreya and the masters were fully public in their work today, it would mean nothing if we are not connecting to our souls, expressing our divinity through our souls, opening that window to spiritual intuition. We've got to take care of our side of the street, so to speak, in terms of transforming the world.
And only a certain number of people. Right, yeah. Exactly. I mean, for most people, it's going to be through the heart. There is, once you're, really interested in being part of doing service and meditation, then that's when the intuition particularly comes into play. But before that, it's the heart. And so we have to be able to, energies from hierarchy have to pass through humanity, and each person has to be able to be connected to their heart so that those energies can actually shine through, and you're reacting not based on belief, which separates and divides and has put us in the world situation that we're in right now, but actually responding from your heart or from your intuition in reflecting your soul, and which the masters stand behind and send energies in that our soul is connected to. So,
let me ask you this.
Yes.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm thinking about the people you just described. 21,000 people die from lack of food every day. And of course, many more are just struggling to take care of themselves and their families. Are they able to come into contact with their hearts? Or is this something where you need to have... clearly, people need to have the basic needs taken care of in order to be able to focus. You can't focus on your heart if you're hungry.
That's right.
What so is coming into contact with the heart kind of something for people with creature comforts, or can anyone access this, or do we need 7 billion people to be in contact with their hearts before Maitreya and the masters emerge?
Well, the masters only need, I think that something, can't remember exactly the figure, but I believe about something like 1.8 billion or something like that. People right now are ready, once Maitreya and the masters are out, to respond to them and do the work necessary of transforming our world. And so it doesn't have to be 7 billion people. It's not going to be that many people. But you're certainly right that, of course, people that are starving or in severe deprivation, the number one task is for the rest of us to be able to help them so that they can have the lives that we all deserve. So yeah.
And that's a way of demonstrating the heart as well, by recognizing the needs of our brothers.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And our current economic system is not about recognizing the needs of our brothers, but of pure self-interest. If it doesn't concern me, I don't need to know about it, which sounds like it's completely contradictory to the impulse of the soul, and you're actually not demonstrating your own divinity in approaching the world that way, it seems to me. We have 2 more minutes, and we haven't covered everything, so we've got to have you back. Did you want to? Was there more that you wanted to say about the energies? And so being at 1, oh, goodness, we're at the end of our show. We've got to continue this. Jonathan, are you available next Sunday so we can continue our conversation on unity?
Yes.
That is excellent, because this is absolutely fascinating. It's so relevant to what's happening in the world. To our audience, we're going to have part 3 with Jonathan Knudsen here on Share on the Air Radio. Follow us on Facebook, Share on the Radio North America, to get updates. Jonathan, thank you so much for taking time today. Look forward to talking with you next week.